just wanna talk with my brothers, is that too much to ask? Might as well look sharp as I'm doing it too. Trish and talk, Trish and talk.
I wanna know. To talk about, and one was your PhD, but really I was very interested in that sort of, because it's Parson Cross you're from, isn't it?
Well, I was born at Nether Edge.
Nether Edge.
But I had my formative years in Parson Cross.
And was it Chaucer School?
Yeah,
So
Maynell Primary. Yeah. But my first school was what's now the Pakistani Muslim Centre.
Oh, okay, no.
Yeah, Woodburn Road School.
Woodburn,
I lived on Westbury Street, which all ties in because Westbury Street butts up to Staniforth Road.
Yeah, and he was
Staniforth was slave owners,
yeah.
so it's like all that things like kind of coming back. It's,
and
it's
you know
crazy.
those old streets them days. That I mean, you're talking there about your PhD there in terms of names. Where I was growing up, we had names like Gordon Road. And days you just thought Gordon Road, Egypt Road, all these places there. We didn't even know anything about these places there. It was just these names you had there because it's sort of late Victorian and that glorification of the British Empire at that time in street names.
And it's amazing, you know, the stuff that, you know, I'm getting old now, but you know, this PhD it has really got me spellbound because. You know, we've known about some of the obvious things, like, you know, even like statues of Churchill. You know, he might have been one of Britain's greatest heroes, but he was also a genocidal maniac. Those are facts. Nelson's column.
It's one of those that you can't talk about Churchill. It's either or what. It's either or. And you know, you talk there about his role in India. You talk about his role there, in Gallipoli, etc. There, in terms of the Dominion's troops and his attitude.
The Bengal,
it's crazy. And you were saying earlier there about history there, and I'm really interested in history, which is that sort of thing where, you know, it's not a case of wanting to throw history out. It's trying to look at history differently. And differently, which is, you know, so at the moment you can't use the word inclusive. Well, you can use the word inclusive, which is, it's non-inclusive. You're just simply saying facts or interpretations of history there have to include a range of perspectives.
Absolutely, and history should be about factual things that happened. So if you're talking about Churchill, he was great for the war cry. I'm not denouncing anything that he did. But you must also consider the genocide that he committed, you know, that he presided over, and his individual instruction to divert that food away from the people in Bengal to troops that didn't need that food. When you talk about...
well, then you're into the whole sort of discussion about empire.
Absolutely.
And the discussion about empire there, where, for instance, that, first of all, that recognition that, I think it's India has the largest standing army of any army in that period, which is fighting, essentially, they've been corralled into fighting for Britain.
Yeah.
And they saved the British East India, whatever they, in terms of Burma. Without the British Indian Army, Burma would have fallen there. But that's never spoken about.
No. You know, when you talk about the British Empire, you know, there's people right now. I remember there was a conversation on GB News. Is it GB News?
It is GB News.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
hard
Well,
news
not
to
that
watch.
I watch it after. If it comes up on a reel,
if you ever book upon it there, it's like, whoa, you're there for 2 minutes. You think I can't believe that?
Well, I don't put it on the television, but if it comes up on a reel, you know, on my social media, then I might watch it. Where people are having a conversation talking about, well, the empire was good. It's like, good for who? You know, who was the empire good for? It's saying it wasn't good for anybody who it subjugated, you know. And so, for me, although, like, Colston statue, that's one of the big issues of this last few years. You know, it was 5 years since George Floyd's murder, just late on last week, I think. So, Colston, he was a big slave owner. But not only was he a slave owner, he became the deputy governor of the Royal African Company. The Royal African Company was royal, obviously, for the royal family at the time. and that would have been, I think, King Charles II.
It could be. It's a sort of 1660s.
Right. So you're talking mid to late 1600s. The company was created under his time, and his brother, who was the Duke of York at the time, King James II, well, soon to become King James II. Well, the Duke of York was the governor of the Royal Africa Company. So we talk about Cosmo, we pull his statue down, but he was one of the players, a big player, but one of the players. And the things that what I'm trying to do with this research, I'm trying to we're talking about historical stuff, but trying to bring it to today. So what people understand today is anything you do, whether you've got a house, a car, if you've got a decent bit of jewellery, you've got insurance. Yeah, you have to have insurance. To insure against loss. The whole concept of insurance, for insurance against loss, came out of the slave trade. That these pirates with their random ships, doing this eternal trips going backwards and forwards, across from West Africa to the triangle trade. They were so brutal that you could have half your investment.
If you start back with we're getting Churchill there. It's not a history podcast, people. It's not a history podcast.
No,
what Robert said there, that he was saying there about being excited and having that brain working again. You and I are the same age. So I appreciate that very sense that actually...
And we've got a similar beard
as well. Which is that excitement.
I'm younger.
Lungani's beard, there's no grey hair.
Yes. But it's that time where you feel as if, that these have been sort of like, you've been dipping in over the years, but never really able to sort of like go in there whole. And actually you have got an opportunity now to go in there deep and whole there to really make all those different connections into today. And I was going to say two things. One, Churchill did say he wrote a history about the slave trade, African slave trade, and he actually calls it was the ballast. The ballast to the industrialization of Britain, the Industrial Revolution. But he wasn't apologising. He was just saying it as a fact. But I'm going to ask you then, back to the school bit there. As you do your PhD now, how does it make you reflect on them school days back on Parson Cross there? Because that's a hell of a journey, man.
No, it is a journey. It is.
I remember, I was quite an intelligent kid, but I didn't achieve at school because nothing in school, apart from messing around, resonated with me. I couldn't understand what they were trying to teach me. So when we did history, that was... I remember like just sweating under my shirt, in my armpits and on my chest, because when we start talking about history, it's going to be about slavery, if we get mentioned, or empire. And then if we talked about geography, it would be about these countries with these nice forests and these other lesser countries with jungles, And so I couldn't really connect with that. And even though I didn't feel like I was conscious as an African at school, obviously there was something always there. So yes, they took us out of Africa, but they can't take Africa out of us.
The school I went to, which had about a third of the school intake was black, we had houses, and one of the houses was called Roads. And I don't know anything about Cecil Rhodes. None of us knew anything about Cecil Rhodes. I can tell you this. None of us knew anything about Cecil Rhodes. And that's where all the black kids were.
Gaslighting. So your guys were on
Rhodes, and none of us knew anything at all about it, but we all felt uneasy about it.
And that's
somewhere there is a deeper thing going on there.
That's right, because that's what I was saying earlier about that's a level of gaslighting that we get done to. Because I was familiar with Rhodes at school, because I was always thinking, whoa, this guy, he's gone over there and he's named a whole country after himself.
Oh yeah, no, but he wasn't
your land country.
That's your land.
He wasn't wasn't just one
So he's
country.
a big guy.
Yeah, two in
Remember-
Zambia.
Yeah, in Zambia, North Rhodesia.
Yes.
South Rhodesia. You know what I'm saying?
And you can
So,
name a
yeah.
country after yourself.
Yes, it
That's
takes,
great, isn't it?
it takes some great cojones to be able to.
Oh, that's right. And he had them all right, you know. And I mean, I want to come back to that, but you know, yeah, the thing at school is that didn't resonate with me. But I remember the first thing that started making me think was reggae music. And I've always had reggae music in my life, as you have. Our generation did.
Hey,
Our
for
fathers'
me,
records.
Tapazuki, MPLA.
No, I'm talking before. No, you're
Yeah,
going
before
too
that.
far,
Yeah,
too
yeah,
soon,
yeah.
my brother.
All right, yeah, but
You
that
go-
was
you
my
went too far too
that was
soon.
a big political
But
breakthrough
no.
for me.
All right. You
Was that
must have
Tapazuki?
heard in the 60s the Conscious Minds
No, I didn't.
on a Green Door label. Okay,
you're
I do a
big-
bit of DJing, but
You
still.
will do a bit.
Right? But no, Africa is Paradise.
I do know that one.
Come
Yes,
on.
yes.
That's a 1960s
Yeah,
tune.
is it? Yeah.
And so when you start to hearing tunes like that,
Yeah.
and then into the 70s, you start hearing Burning Spear.
Oh, yeah.
Columbus was a damn blasted liar.
Liar.
Yeah.
And
Damn
you
blasted
think,
liar.
"Ooh, that's a bit strong. That.
I was
Let me look into
a
that.
damn blasted
Yeah,
liar.
and it was Rastaman music.
Yes.
Yeah.
That started to put me
Yes.
and give me some hope.
Yes.
I won't talk about it at school, not even at work when
But
I
the
started
school
work at
you
16.
went to, you wouldn't have got that sort of opportunity,
Oh
would
gosh,
you?
no.
Yeah.
No. I didn't have that conversation at home because my dad wasn't Rasta for sure, but he had some Rasta music.
Yes.
But he was Christian, and we know how Rastas were seen.
Yes, absolutely. Bring it to
in
me,
1950s, 1960s Jamaica,
Yeah.
where you could lose your life for loxing up in Jamaica, you know. And so, yeah, it was those early drippings of adding to my consciousness. And I remember when I was at school, it might have been my last year at school. I think it was the Sharpsville Massacre. Was that 1976?
Oh, yeah,
76,
yeah.
yes.
1976?
That was a big event for us all,
And
wasn't it?
I remember thinking, I remember not thinking, but feeling
Yes.
that young man walking down the road with, I assume, was his sister's dead, limp body in his hands.
Well-
That somehow I was connected to that.
Or it was the sister holding his brother.
Yeah.
Because he was a little boy. I think
Yeah,
he was
Well,
a-
but
but
that's-
this was a man, a young man. I would say maybe 16, 18 years old. But one of the photos
Oh, yeah.
that I saw.
Oh, yeah,
that's
yeah,
the
oh,
sister.
yeah.
From the Sharpsville Massacre.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's
You know?
61, isn't it, Sharpeville? Because you got
Was
Steve
it?
Biko. Steve Biko is 76.
Yeah, 76.
And,
The
that was
Soweto.
ignited by,
The
if I'm
Soweto
right, if I'm
uprising.
right, by when they wanted to introduce the Afrikaans
Cons-
language
yeah.
instead of
Yes.
English,
Yeah.
which
Yes.
was to make people more ignorant of
Yes,
the
of
world
course.
around them.
Yeah.
And that point you're making about consciousness there was
Yes.
a really important
Yeah.
thing at that time. In the mid-70s, everything was about
Yeah.
consciousness.
And another thing in the 70s was Roots. The TV series Roots by Alex Haley. And although none of us, or very few of us, I wasn't one, but very few of us who were born of parents who were born in the Caribbean were talking about Africa as homeland.
No.
Yeah? And so watching Roots again, I had a feeling that was part of me. Kunta Kinte, Chicken George, they were part of me. But
It was a very
I couldn't
difficult watch, though,
articulate
wasn't it?
Yeah, I couldn't articulate it. And then from there, I just started building my consciousness. And it really started to, my education really started when I was 25, 26 years old, sitting in Sadaka's African history classes as part of Saturday school.
Yeah.
That's when it started to grow for me,
Yeah.
with Baba George Anthony, who was the teacher there, maths, English. But I wasn't interested in that. I should have been, but I wasn't. I was interested in the history.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I'm trying to look at in this PhD is this whole pseudoscience of race, which can't be disregarded, because for all these things that happen in empire and through Christianity, I'm not a religious person, and I'm not saying anything about religion is bad, but we can't forget that Christianity was used to take us away from our African root, from our spiritualism. There was a time in our in our time, there was a time when we didn't have a religion, but we had spiritual systems.
Yeah.
And religion was used, or organized religion, I'll say, was used to take that away from us. And so you've got this, and then they create this thing called race, which basically dehumanizes everything about us and what we are. So, you know, even if you were born in Zimbabwe
Yeah.
or South Africa or what's become Zimbabwe, you know, as I think even that's another conversation about, you know, are these, you know, what did our ancestors call these countries? Because I know they didn't call them Nigeria or Ghana
Well,
or
there were
Gambia.
countries as such, weren't there? There were people.
Yeah,
My
exactly.
people.
They were just regions.
People,
They
yeah.
were
Wherever my
just regions
people
with
are.
kingdoms, weren't they? You know.
Yes.
But this thing called race tells us that what we're doing is not only uncivilized, it's not quite human. So when they take you and I, or our parents, out of Africa, all of a sudden we become Negro, or we become mulatto, or half caste.
Therefore, we just
quadroon.
become essentially
Quadroon.
our colour. We don't become any more
Yes,
than that.
and the colour is not human.
That's not human.
Right, so this term half caste, yes, it's a very derogatory term. It's a shocking term. But a lot of people don't understand is that what that term meant was you were only half a human being. Only the white side of you was recognised as a human being. So when they can then reduce you to less than a human being, then what they did in slavery is easy to these people. And then, you know, looking at how these people created this whole moral framework to justify that. So a man could, you know, whip the back off your wife on the plantation and then anally rape you in front of your son. And then go home
how do you
and make
then-
love to his wife and have a nice Sunday dinner and take his children out for a picnic.
So how do you then, I mean, as you study these things, and when, you know, when any of us who've actually looked at these things in that sort of detail you're looking at there, how do you manage to sort of like, I'm going to call it keep sane, but sort of like keep a sort of like where you say when we go
A level of decorum.
well, not decorum, but you say you open up, because we'll go on to this in a bit there.
Yeah.
With the men's group you and I attend, you often open up the session by saying about the need for this group is to support one another, so that actually when we're talking about the 1 to 10 in our reaction to things, that when we've got some pretty hard things coming at us, that we don't just go straight to 9 or 10. How do you keep yourself in around that 5, 6 area?
You know, it's, of course, I don't disregard my emotions, but I can manage them quite well. As I say, I'm getting on, so there isn't a name that I can be called that could get a rise out of me. You know, I'm not a violent man. I know. I know I can sound violent and with my tone of
Make
voice,
noise.
and I can make some noise.
Yes.
But that's part of a self-defensive mechanism.
Yeah.
So, you know, hopefully it backs people away rather than draws them in. You know, but because I can see racism for what it is, and most people who express racism or think that they're in some kind of hierarchy of intelligence and humanity, they don't understand what it is that they think. You know, and I kind of like got some of this thinking from Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture.
Yeah, Kwame
you know?
Ture, yeah.
Yeah, he originally was called Stokely Carmichael. You know, and he was talking about capitalism, and he said the trouble with capitalism is that capitalism makes you think that you're thinking. Yeah. And racism does the same thing. It makes you think that you know what you're talking about humanity. And so, whilst people have created this thing called race and put the original people at the bottom of the pile, from which all other peoples have been extrapolated from, there's only one set of human beings what could have created the world. And that's not anybody in Europe or in China or in South America. We populated all of that. And when you start to understand it like that, you know, that's how I bring it down. And you know, I had 2 days at the Cutler's Hall last week. Because this is about the PhD, I don't know nobody was talking about that, but you know, it's a great opportunity to actually to understand some of the things that happen in Sheffield, because, you know, I know more about some of the things that happen in Nottingham. I mean, that was a hardcore place to be at one time. Top yardie gangsters were running Nottingham. No, I know more about Manchester, Birmingham,
Yeah, you
London, Glasgow and Edinburgh. But I don't know about Sheffield. Well, I'm starting to learn about Sheffield.
Well, it's interesting because I'm just reading a book by a guy called Lanry Bakari who came to Sheffield recently, Festival of Debate, and he's done a book which is about the black communities outside of London. And he's asked that question, why is Sheffield not in there? And he basically says, well, I haven't got Leeds in it. His idea being that actually there are so many stories of black communities in Britain which have often been, well, it's often when you want to talk about British black communities, you centre it on London, he's basically saying. So he goes to Cardiff, he goes to Manchester, he goes to Liverpool, he goes to Wolverhampton. But you're right, the Sheffield black story is in itself a story which is little known.
Yeah, and part of that has been about how Sheffield has projected itself as an as a abolition city, as an anti-apartheid. I mean, Sheffield, I think, was the first in the country to say to South Africa, your sport people cannot come here and use all our wonderful facilities, and that we will not engage with South Africa politically, economically.
What about the iron it made?
You know, we're currently known as the city of sanctuary.
Yeah.
But then what we have to also put aside of Sheffield's profile is Sheffield has been and remains one of the worst authorities in the country for excluding black boys at school. We are 6 times more likely to be stopped and searched in Sheffield. You know, we have high unemployment rates, and for me, I've always thought about these things. I'm thinking, oh well, how can Sheffield be the city of sanctuary? How can it have been high in abolition and in the suffrage movement, but it has all this here that's contradicting its profile? You know, then we get to learn that, you know, Sheffield was steeped in trading in the slave trade. Yes, there were only a handful, maybe one or two, of slave owners, one of which were the Staniforths, who got Staniforth Road named after them. So I'm thinking, well, if you were an abolition city and you were there in suffrage and you're anti-abolition, and you were an anti-apartheid city, how did you even come to think about naming a street after a slave owner? It just, you know, and we have this almost schizophrenic approach to how you have to think about Sheffield. And I just thought, how Sheffield did it was, I don't know what percentage, but it's a very high percentage of the tool makers in Sheffield traded in the slave trade. Almost every single one. That's where the money was. So if you were Mr. Sitwell, who had a tool making company, the Sitwell Arms out Venice Shoreway on the outskirts of the city.
They were a big family.
And then there was also Mount Pleasant, which used to be
a
community, right?
Yes.
Well, that was Mr. Sitwell's home. And what's at the front there, Ross's, I'm guessing the Italian at the front of the walled parameter there is possibly where his servants were, or gate people were, let him into the grounds, and possibly Mount Pleasant Park was a part of his grounds, because they didn't just buy a house, they bought grounds, you know. And you think, well, was Sheffield built on slavery? And I think it's a very high percentage that it was. And so I was at Cottrell's Hall for 2 days last week as part of the funding body that funds the PhD, White Rose College of Arts and Humanities in Leeds. We were there for 2 days, and then I think this guy's called a Beadle. He's basically the caretaker and the guy who looks after the whole building and gets here, make sure that the rooms are set up, etc. And he knows the history of the building, so he takes us on a tour of the building for an hour. He was on a tour of the building for an hour and never mentioned slavery. Never, ever mentioned. And I'm talking about, you know, how do I contain myself? At that moment, I nearly lost it.
Yeah.
Because I know for a fact that almost every tool-making company in Sheffield made hose for the plantation.
But you know that, but that very thing there,
and never mentioned slavery once. And you know, because it started mid 17th century, right in the height.
But how do you that? I mean, that's that point there, which is we all had this, and throughout our lives, when you're in Britain, there as racialized, minoritized people, which is there's so many occasions when you don't say what you really feel. And it's like it's eating away at you. And I may have said before about a book I read there which talks about, it's based on African Americans there, how regardless of socioeconomic status, that in fact middle class African Americans are more likely to die younger than their comparative white. Now, compared to even more, working class, lower socioeconomics. The gap between the lower socioeconomic African American whites and whites is smaller than it is for the middle class group. And that clearly is because they say that you're in these environments where we've talked about it before with previous guests about being the lone black. Yeah. And the pressure that puts on you in an internalized way really can eat away at people there.
It does, because there's a cost when we have to live through this through the prism of race. There is a heavy cost.
Yes.
I put on some Malcolm X. I needed a bit of motivation. Not for this. I was doing some of my redraft on my chapter, and my head started. So I just thought, I just need a bit. So I bought some vinyl of Malcolm X speeches in Harlem in the 80s from a bookshop there, and I just needed a bit of inspiration. And one of the speeches I did is, "Who taught you to hate yourself?" Malcolm X. If you've not heard that speech he made, get it. It's easily attainable. Who taught you to hate yourself? Yeah. And when you hear stuff like that, you think, "Oh, but I don't really hate myself." But there are these things. If I didn't know you, and so you're walking down the street, and you might be doing something a bit bizarre, would I take a wide girth?
Yeah. And have we?
Yes,
That's
I
the
have.
other thing. And have we?
I have.
Let's be honest. Yes.
And then I've got to check myself because I've seen I've seen people look like me in cars that I drive or cars that I have driven, and think, "Oh, I wonder how he's got that." Then I've got to pinch myself because I drive cars like that and I'm straight.
Yeah.
I've never been arrested. I've never even been arrested in my life. I'm proud of that. In this situation, but it's 6 times a rate, and we have to keep rechecking ourselves through this prism of race because it's impossible to get away from, but we can start to reframe our thinking, and so at one time, would we have got into this wonderful establishment, the University of Sheffield, to do something like this?
No, well, that's a question. Whatever it's been a struggle.
Yes,
and the
everything's a struggle.
Everything's a struggle.
Yeah.
And the one thing about ages as you get older is, and you got younger people, and we've had lots of younger people on there, and it's great to have them there. Is actually, if they ever ask you about, will it always be? It's not always will be, but you say it is a struggle.
Yeah.
What before us was a struggle.
Yeah.
And what was before us was a struggle.
Yeah.
So what will come after us will be a struggle as well.
That's right. And for me, again, part of that, or part of the answer to the question, or how do I maintain myself? I maintain it through the truth. Because I've had this framework in my mind. I'm still learning how to articulate it. And so in the late 80s, when I started boxing at Brendan Ingles' camp in Winkerbank, I used to talk like this then. Talk about Malcolm X, talk about being conscious. I used to work with some of the other boxers to make sure that they got their dues and weren't being ripped off. I won't say by who.
That's boxing.
Right? But probably, one of the best boxers that's ever laced gloves, in my humble opinion, Nassim Ahmed. He nicknamed me African Bob. That's what he used to call me in boxing. Nasty. Because I used to talk like this then.
Yeah.
Conscious and open and not be afraid. And even though some around me, some black ones, some of the main coaches, again, I won't remember, no, they used to have a go, try and quieten me down. But once you know the truth, you know the truth.
Yeah.
And the thing about the truth is, it doesn't change. The truth cannot change.
Yeah. So for you, then, that's important. Being able to be yourself as well as you can be yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which
So
is
to
a
be
hard-
comfortable in yourself.
Yeah.
And it can be a difficult place to maintain at times because you get people and things coming at you.
Yeah.
You know. But I've learned to be comfortable in it. I've learned to be a lone voice.
Yeah.
And happy
But
with it.
then, how do you, considering how public your platform is and how entrenched in the, like in some of the work in Sheffield? I mean, we are part of a community that survives off the handouts from, the government, so to speak.
Yes.
How do you juggle that? How do you maintain your truth at the same time, still knowing that you'll still have to have conversations with the same kind of?
It's difficult, but like when I started working for the probation service in 1993, I made a conscious decision that I was going to be my authentic self because I've had to assimilate for far too long. And we have to assimilate. And when we assimilate, we lose ourselves and we become something that we are not. And what I've also learned, when we assimilate and we keep giving to appease, we're still treated in the same way.
Oh yeah,
You still lose your life. You know, if you get not well, yes, not so often in England, but it has happened. But you can be stopped by a police officer, and you can give them all you want. You can still lose your life.
Yeah.
Can be a bit quicker in America because they've got into.
Well, that
But-
makes me think of Du Bois, when Du Bois does that about the idea about the exceptional 10%.
Yeah.
Well, actually, he has to revise that later on in his life. But basically, it don't make any difference.
That's right.
Because
No,
the
he
Malcolm X
doesn't.
says it, doesn't he? What do you call the black professor walking down the street? And he uses
Yeah.
the N-word there because that's what the reality is.
That's right. And I've made a decision a long time ago, and it's put me in a difficult position in someone else's perception, not in a difficult position that I feel difficult in or uncomfortable in. So, in my role as chair of Sadaka, in the early days, I've been chair there 10 years now, and in the early days, I used to, the way that the old board left and the new board came in with me as chair it was a difficult time. We didn't have no handover, so I had to find out who the networks were and create my own networks. With Olivier and Rob as well. And so I used to ring up the council to make some inquiry about a daycare centre grant. And I get put through to the grant people, and it's Rob Cottrell, chair of Sadaka. Can I speak to? Oh, you're Rob Cottrell. It's like,
Yeah.
now,
No,
this
just-
side of my brain's thinking, you don't know me, and how dare you?
Yeah.
The audacity.
Yeah.
You don't know who I am. And clearly you don't, because although you won't talk to me like that, but because it's early days,
Yeah.
I've got to absorb that. But when I start to get around the table, and honestly, you can ask Olivier this because he's heard me say it, and Rob Walcott. We sat around the table with councillors, and they say, okay, I think it's time we need to have a full and frank conversation, because their conversation was always going to end in, they were going to take the building back.
Yeah.
Right? In the first 6-7 years, they were ardent, going to take the building back. I'm not going to name all councillors because I don't need to name them, but there have been some that have acted in less than the position that they were given, if I can put it that way. And during this full and frank conversation, they'd be telling us about all the mismanagement and this and that at Sadaka, and we'd listen, because some of it was true. But then when it was my turn, I would say, you did say full and frank, so okay. Part of the failure of this organisation has been about the council being complicit
Absolutely. Allowing it
in
to
that
fail.
failure.
Yes.
Ooh,
Yeah.
they didn't like it, but I've started the ball rolling.
Well, you said
Because
full and
I need
frank.
to set our stall
Yes,
out.
yeah.
Yeah,
Full and frank.
I need to set
It
our
can't be
stall out.
one way, can
so,
it?
Yeah. So I said, in Sadaka's old days, prior to me, City Council had 2 board places, and I don't know who those people were that turned up, but something's gone wrong in the management of the organisation, and in that sense, you were being complicit. So then, moving on, I would say, for us to go forward, we're not going to be sitting here like the old board did. We're not like overly thankful, because we've earned a right to have that building. That the gentrification program is coming in now, well, that's by the by. But we're not sitting here with cap in hand. We're not asking you for anything. But what we are saying is, unless we are equal partners around this table, choose whatever position you sit in or whatever cabinet that you represent, then there's no further conversation. That was very early on. And so that's how I manage myself there. Now, I become known as the very difficult one. And that's fine. That is fine for me, because I'm not, in Malcolm X terms, I'm not a house Negro. I wouldn't burn the house down, but the house is not going to burn me down.
Well, that does sound like by any means necessary.
No, but
There's
that-
always a defensive position.
It is, but by any means necessary. It's always been-
If you come to me,
yeah,
I have to step back.
that's right. But you see, what
it's-
a lot of people are far too willing to pin onto Malcolm X with that. Malcolm X was called a violent man, but he never meted any violence out. No violence. His by any means necessary was by any means necessary. So if you come with me with a reasonable plan to talk, then let's talk. But if you're going to stick a knife in me, whether metaphorically or physically, then if I've got the means, I'm going to return it.
But that's always how it's always been. I remember doing a documentary around the myth around. Well, it's called The Myth and the Reality of Mental Health. The conversation with some of the service users of SACMA and some of the kind of doctors around the same issue, and something that came out of that was the fact that most of the people ended up being sectioned, which would look like us. Say that sometimes it's because of the way we present. We use our hands. we are expressive, and sometimes to those in power, they felt threatened.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've seen this in the States.
Yeah.
Oh, I threw out my gun because I felt threatened.
Well, look, for me, I mean, we've said this one, and I'm going to come to this about the group, men's group. We've talked about, for instance, the footballer Dalian Atkinson.
Yeah.
Dalian Atkinson there, 45 years of age there, and he's distressed. And what happens to him is that in that distress moments, he is perceived as a dangerous black man. And for me personally, in my own naivety, thinking as I'd got older that actually I would be perceived less in that way, was naive. That's what it was. That's what it told me. I was wanting it to be like that, but I was naive, and that was the wake-up call for me, which is, if I present as distressed out on the street today, 65 as I am, feeble as I am, I'm still going to be perceived as aggressive.
That's
Oh,
right.
yeah.
And like tying that point and what you were saying earlier about like being this lone person, because we're not designed to be lone.
No.
We are designed. We are communal. That's our natural state. It's our natural state to gravitate towards others who look like us. And that is another human being, not another African, but another human being we are drawn. So when we get our thoughts and behaviours polarised along these lines of race, I think some of that, when we've projected as something that we're not, because you can, whatever comes out here and what people see on the face is one thing, but your gut tells you something else, and your gut makes you feel something different. And when your whole person is in conflict with what's coming out here, with what's in your gut. I think that, if that makes sense, is one of the things that has driven some of us to a state of not being able to manage our mental health.
Absolutely.
There are a whole range of reasons
Absolutely.
why someone can struggle with their mental health, but some of us we've been forced to assimilate a bit too much. Some of us are bought into that too much. The way that we speak, dress, project. About who we won't associate with rather than who we will associate with, it brings problems.
Awesome. And I'm mindful of time, and I really want to get to talk about this a bit, which is the men's group.
Yeah.
I mean, the men's group there, which you've basically been one of the key people there for the past, I don't know, how many years now? How many years has it been?
Oh gosh, just before lockdown,
Just
so
before
2018.
lockdown. Yeah, and we had one recently, which was a powerful one.
Yeah, that
I mean,
was
there
a
are some
powerful
powerful
Yeah.
sessions, aren't they?
Yeah,
and
they
when
are.
you talk there about we're not designed to be on our own, that to my mind is a classic example of that, because
Absolutely.
at the end of those sessions there, that group, it's a brotherhood, isn't it?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
because some of the things that we talk about there are some of the things that we never used to talk about. And so whether it's about a financial problem, whether it's about a health problem,
Relationship.
a relationship problem, big one,
Big
relationship
ones, yes,
problem,
absolutely.
or a work problem. Those are things that we held in because we're men. We're men. Yeah. But we know that that's been a whole combination of things that have brought us to a sad demise.
Oh yes.
Right? And so the other thing that we've talked about is that, again, people think I talk about race too much, but actually we don't talk about it enough, right? And that is, race tells us two very different things. On the one hand, we're the ultimate in machismo, yeah? We're the ultimate in sexuality. We're all hung. Well, I missed out there. Right?
One of the good things about the group is that there is well, not say modesty, but no
There
one's
is.
playing that game.
No, they're not.
Because actually,
Yeah,
you don't have to play that
That's
game.
fine. And so when you raise it, if people start thinking, but like we are, when we used to go downtown in Nottingham or in Sheffield, like some of us like we were meant to be, we were the place to be, and we had a stereotype. So you've got your stereotype. So then, of course, when we are feeling vulnerable, when we're feeling weak, when we feel like we can't cope, who do we complain to? No one.
No
because
one.
you're Big Donald.
Yes.
Well, what's wrong with you, man?
Yes.
Pull yourself together.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Or like my parents used to say in Jamaican vernacular, you're a big man.
Big
You're a
well,
big
that's
man.
what-
Pull yourself together, man. Yeah.
And if you
And
don't
so-
learn how to do it, you don't know how to do it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so we've got these competing things with us all the time.
Yes.
And race forces into this crazy prism, that it's impossible to navigate through. But then, going back earlier, as I said, how do I cope? Well, it's because I understand that race and racism, that they are, it's a false dichotomy. Race is a pseudoscience. It has no scientific nor biological basis. But it's very easy to create a sociological basis. Yeah? When you've had a group of people on a plot of land for 400 years, not just generating money for you and your plantation people, but generating money for your country back home in England, or France, or Germany, or Belgium, or Holland, and obviously mainland America and Canada. Well, 400 years of free labour, literally, as Malcolm X said, working from sun up to sun down. That's like a 18, 20-hour day some days.
Oh,
you know.
yes.
And so when you've got that, and you've got all the resources, what's happening in Africa now, people say, there's corruption and these weak leaders. No, actually, it's not actually corruption, because it's set up to work as it is. They're not really weak leaders, whoever is it, they're not weak leaders. They're working as the CIA and the respective
IMF.
governments from neocolonialism have instructed.
Yeah.
So we know what's happened to our strong leaders. You know,
Lubumba. You can name the list can go down. And
how,
down.
how many could be named right now
Yeah.
from post the colonial period right up to Steve Biko over a 20-year period? Every strong leader got took out.
Did you watch the documentary about Patrice Lubumba, which had
No.
a jazz sort of like soundtrack as well there? Look it out. because- Recently, last year.
I've
I
not been
saw-
watching lots of television because I've got too much
No,
work
it's,
to
no,
do.
it's on. It was at the cinema, but watch that because that is one of those. But you know, you think no matter what you might think, when you start to find out more, it's worse than what you thought, and that's the bit which actually is really sort of like you think.
That's right.
Part of you doesn't want to believe all of those
that's
sort
right.
of things.
And you know, when we look at all these murders, whether it's from, well, George Floyd is not even the last one, but let's choose George Floyd. It's a name that everybody knows. And if we go from George Floyd all the way back to who was Congo's leader in 1960s, 70s?
Congo.
They saved one of his teeth. They dissolved him in acid.
Oh yes,
Lumumba.
it was Lumumba. It was
Patrice
Patrice
Lumumba.
Yeah.
So, whether it's from Patrice Lumumba or off to George Floyd, all these murders, all this inhumanity, and all this disregard, and what happens? Nothing.
Nothing.
We just get on with life, and they get on with life. Them systems are maintained, and they are maintained through this thing called race. But when you start to understand it like that, it has a less of a traumatic. It's still trauma.
Yes.
You know, but it doesn't make you want to go out there. It doesn't make me want to go out there and burn something down or thump somebody down, you know, because I understand what's happening.
But don't you think that that's where the problem is, you know? Because you know, one of the frustrations I usually have, I mean, like yourself, I mean, I sort of, you know, kind of. I say, you know, I'm a child of Pan-Africanism. You know, I grew up in that. I grew up in that era where we took to the streets, we marched, we did a lot of things. I mean, we walked on the other side of the road in our own country. You know what I'm saying? But then when you suddenly look at the way the world is structured now, I mean, and I'm thinking, why do we continue to walk in the same blueprint? They said, where? Because when you suddenly ask, you know, like, where is the black print?
Yeah. Well, you see,
You know?
again, as part of that as part of that race thing, I think we've also got to bin black. We've got to bin white. You know, I too am not a black man. I'm an African.
Yeah.
You know, because for us to really make the progress, we've got to really throw away all this baggage. You know, your family has been in that part of Africa forever until you decided to leave. Right?
That's true.
But when did they become black?
No, but that's the thing.
You-
I never knew. I never knew I was
Well,
black
that's
until
what
I
exactly.
came here.
Until they come
Exactly.
to
And our
Europe.
parents were the same here.
Yeah.
Because when our parents were being called black here in Sheffield, they were thinking, I'm Jamaican,
Yeah.
or I'm Bajan, or I'm Trini. You know?
Yeah.
And so when did we become black? You know, when did we know when we became Negro? And this is all part of that programming. I think we've got to get rid of that programming. We've got to unlearn to relearn.
So,
You know?
But you know that process. I often, I mean, sorry, I don't want to do this sort of like referencing people, but when I hear that, I often think of guy, the French Caribbean writer, Frantz
Fanon, Frantz Fanon.
Frantz Fanon. When Frantz Fanon there, and when you read his book, his two books there, particularly there, you get a sense of when he talks about now you need to learn, you need to unlearn, but also you have to deconstruct yourself.
Yes.
And we know in anything about in psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, and psychiatry, that deconstruction of self is a scary place to go.
It is.
Most people don't want to go anywhere near that.
It is, because then when you start going through it, you've then got to start going realizing that there's some things you have to let go.
Yeah.
Some things that you enjoy doing, you've got to let go.
Yeah.
You know, but it is a scary space.
There's a lady I recently met from Birmingham recently. It was at the Ellesmere Center. I think she was one of the people where, instrumental in setting up, black mental health, kind of infrastructure in Birmingham. She's a trainer and stuff. I remember a conversation we had. She said, I'm going to stop, training this organization like the police or the NHS around racism.
Yeah.
And this is a black woman who says my organization is a lucrative endeavor, this training and stuff, but I'm going to stop because it's not making any difference.
No,
what we also have to understand is that, and it's something that I'm going to analyse further, and I'm going to write into my PhD thesis. There's a white French philosopher. He's got a bit of a checkered history in his interest in young children in Morocco, I think. But Michel Foucault.
Yes. Oh, Foucault, yes.
Yes, right. Well, he has a bit of a checkered history.
He was a pervert.
But his philosophy.
Right. Modernism.
Is complex. But he basically, I've been saying for a while that racism and race, they are not broken systems. They're not aberrations. They work as designed.
As designed.
Yeah. And Foucault writes that, and philosophizes that this is a deliberate machinery of government and governmentality, whether civic, national, or international. And yeah, of course, when you think about it, why has there been no further outcry than our individual voices, from Patricia Lumumba to George Floyd? If this was happening in any other community, well, it wouldn't. That's it.
Yeah, it wouldn't.
Because that's what our race is meant to be. But race works as designed. It's a very, very, very good, efficient, and successful system.
That's it. Because if you look at it, if we look at the apartheid as construct, that was a deliberate thing and written in law to say we are going to subdue these people and we are going to, and as a result we are going to own everything they deem. Yeah. But now then when you suddenly get EMF, was it Malema, Julius Malema, and some of these newer guys saying that you guys leave. Yeah. Suddenly, then you get the Donald Trump suddenly saying, but this is an unfairness.
Yeah, they can. But the likes of Donald Trump, he can say that there's a white genocide going on. But where's your evidence? When you show us your evidence, we can have another ear and another conversation. But this thing called race. I'll tell you what, another thing that it did in South Africa. People would argue today, 30 years since apartheid ended. Has it changed a great deal for a hell of a lot of people in South Africa? No, it hasn't.
No, it hasn't.
Right, it hasn't changed. So then you get the likes of Mandela. I've got a big thumbs down for Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu because they were the creators of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and they used Ubuntu, the African philosophy of communalism and humanism. They used this to basically excuse white Afrikaners from the murders that they committed and the atrocities that they committed. They used the Truth and Reconciliation to say, this is a new South Africa. Well, it's a new South Africa. Well, actually, it's not a new South Africa for anyone. Maybe for an international conversation, but for white Afrikaners, it's the same. And for the Sosa, etc., it's the same. Unfortunately, and so this it's a multi-headed snake. This thing called race. We've got to. I'm not. Whatever capitalism's here, it will be here.
Well, then you are talking about racial capitalism, aren't you? There.
Yes, absolutely.
We can go and use all the different people, etc. There.
Absolutely, it always has been because slavery. Yeah. If you read Eric Williams, Capital and Slavery, then he will argue very successfully that the proceeds from slavery launched capitalism here, launched the Industrial Revolution here, rather than from the looming wheel in India. So
Yeah.
capitalism has always been racial and always will be.
Yeah, and we know, I mean, if you're talking about the present day going back 400 years, I mean, I'm going to, the quote, which is supposed to have been attributed to President Lyndon B. Johnson, which is, if you convince the lowest white man he's better than the best coloured man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pocket for you.
That's
and
right.
we see it today.
That's right.
The discussions which are taking place about how the police having to break their normal convention of not referencing the ethnicity of the suspect, Liverpool guy there, because of within a second the social media was full of people
and it
speculating.
continues. Even though they've identified him,
they're still saying it's a lie.
For them,
Yes.
For the far right, well, that's just part of the conspiracy.
Absolutely, yes.
So
The truth,
when you don't know the truth,
Yes.
then you can never know the truth.
But that's at play there, and that's
Yeah,
and that's 400
of course.
years. And if you talk there about having to do the unlearning's scary for everybody then.
Absolutely,
Because-
absolutely. And so these same people, talking about this double standard system.
Yeah.
Well, we know there's always been a double standard system.
Oh, it's been-
Because if I commit a burglary, and I know this for facts because I've worked in criminal justice for almost 30 years. If I commit a burglary alongside my white mate in Parson Cross, I'm going to get 5 years, and he might get a community sentence, or he might get a year. There's always been disparity. But what this conspiracy now from the far right is saying is that, there's a double standard, that, white people are getting treated worse, or the white working classes, that they're done too worse in education than any other group. No, that actually, the statistics and the evidence doesn't support that. There used to be a saying in the early 80s. You're too young for to remember this.
I was around, man.
Yeah, Harold, 2. You were on about 2.
He's a bit older than
I know,
you.
man. I know, guy. I'm nipping at your heels, guy.
He's not yet a proper big man.
But in the early 80s, around this, when we had a strong movement towards anti-racism, and there used to be a racism awareness for this old rat training and stuff like that. There used to be a saying that black people in the working class are in the same boat. But people then started adding in, yes, black people in the working class are on the same boat, but they're on different decks.
Yes.
And that quote there.
That quote,
that's
is
right.
there. Yeah.
Because now those people, there was a time when, Irish people were on the plantations. They were taught this saying from Lyndon B. Johnson.
But you talked there about it's by design. And
absolutely.
I go back to my little bit of knowledge there is about in Virginia in the 1619 or something like that, when there is the Africans, whites, poor whites, and indigenous people there, they rise up in rebellion. And when they quell the rebellion, they give rights to the whites.
Yeah.
So you've made your decision to divide. The one thing we can pull you in with now is with this.
That's right. And one of the things that, going back even further, I think 1457, Pope Louis V, right, issued a papal bull to the Portuguese, which basically said anybody who's not Roman Catholic, you can enslave. Now, they couldn't do that down the east coast of Africa, because the Arabs have been and continue to enslave Eastern Africa. It's part of a conversation that we don't have, because part of that has meant that now Algiers, Morocco, Egypt and Tunisia are now regarded as Arab states. In fact, I think it's Egypt and Morocco are actually regarded geopolitically, are regarded as part of the Middle East.
Interesting when you talk
not
to
Africa. They're regarded as the Middle East.
When you talk to African people there who've resided in Arabic nations, you get a very, very different story.
That's right.
Which is
because there is a different story.
Yes.
And so the Portuguese knew that there was no point in attacking the East Coast. That was already covered. So that's why they came to the West Coast. And that's why we must have this greater conversation about the role of religion.
Yes.
Right? Because, and then how that then, when we were on the plantations and we were given a Bible, we were given a plantation Bible, not the Bible. I mean, I don't have time for either, personally. But, we have to know that when we're when we're singing songs in church called Amazing Grace, and that was sung today. I mean, I don't sing in church. I try not to be disrespectful, but I don't sing in church. So, no, Amazing Grace, that was written by a slave owner.
Mm-hmm.
You know, many of the hymns and practices in churches were written by slave owners. This is not part of, again, what I'm bringing into this research about this this moral exclusion, that you've got to split your moral base, that what you might do for your family, you're not going to do for an enemy, but you can justify it. Or not even anybody, you know, because like whose enemy were we? But you got to split that moral base, you know, so you can be totally violent and dehumanizing to someone and go home and love someone else. It's a crazy mentality, but that's what race does.
I'm going to ask one more question before Lungani asks this final question. Throughout this session, our conversation here, what's been very evident is that the work you're doing at the university is really, really sort of like, there's a passion there.
Absolutely.
Like, how important is that to you to have such a fire at this moment in time? You started the conversation with, basically, I'm a big man now.
Old man, I say.
Old man.
You're a big man.
So there you is as an old man to have this type of passion.
You know, I've had a passion for these things for a long time in my life. You know, I've been a Pan-Africanist since my early 20s. You know, I started with being a member of the AAPRP.
Oh, yeah,
All
Same
African
one.
People's Revolutionary Party.
Yeah.
You too?
Yeah, man. Yeah. Right.
But I started there, but I pulled away because it was becoming a bit too elitist with the intelligentsia section at the top, and you know, it didn't need that. We just need to be Pan-Africanists. But so it's been a long time, and you know, this PhD is bringing together actually a lot of strands of my life. This is basically, you know, part of the backbone of my life, and to be able to articulate some of this, although I see myself as a Sheffielder because I'm born here, and I've lived most of my life here and done most of my work here. And so I've contributed a lot to Sheffield, not just through work, paid work, but through voluntary work and community work, you know, stuff at Sadaka, but stuff before that, you know, as an amateur boxing coach, etc. I've given my life to Sheffield. And my biggest hope is that what I managed to construct with the blessing and help of communities in Sheffield is that this will be taken by Sheffield City Council, and that they will go with, if it's deemed to be a good piece of work, which it will be, that they go with it and they use it to enable us to have a different flavour in Sheffield, that everybody can really start to understand what made this town a city. This town wasn't a city till 1897, you know. If someone could do an economic analysis like Eric Williams did for the whole of England, someone could like extrapolate that and do one on Sheffield, because there's not much mention about Sheffield and Eric Williams, because again, this stuff was subverted. Yes. That would be very interesting to see how Sheffield grew from this group of farmlands into a town, into a city. And I'm hoping that my contribution to that will be for the people of Sheffield. So so the passion's there, definitely.
Yeah, but that's one of the things I was going to touch on. I mean, as long as I've known you, there's always been that fire.
Thank you.
And now my question is, how do you stay on top of your game, fully knowing what you know, in terms of you know, sometimes the misalignment of the reality in which we live? You know, how do you maintain a good, at least some semblance of normal well-being?
You know, people tell you I do a myriad of things. So I've had to give some things up to do this PhD because it's just time. But the one thing I'll never give up is my music. So I do some DJing, as you know, on Sheffield Live. I wasn't a DJ as such, but my dad died in 2007. I took his 45 7-inch singles, my brother took his albums. I put them with my record collection and I built from there. And like a fool, I went to Sheffield Live and said, "Oh, I can do you an old revival reggae show if you want," because they were looking for program content. And they said, "Yeah." And I thought, "Oh, what am I going to do next?" So that's how it started. And so I can play music that I've been playing 50 years. I'm 65 now. And some of my music I've owned 50 years now. Then I've had my dad's a bit longer than that, some of them. And I can play some of them tracks that I've heard a million times, and they can draw. I can go welling up from here and just burst out in tears. You know. So I make sure I have an outlet in music. I have an outlet in not holding my emotions in. I have an outlet going to the gym when I can get to the gym, which is not as often as I was doing. Because now I'm up at the same time. I just get up at 5:25, get ready to go to the gym for 6. Now I'm getting up at 5:25, get ready, and I'm up into my study to do some work. But one of the things is sharing this conversation, you know, because this is truly a Sheffield conversation. Some of it will be international because there'll be 3 case studies, and I'm thinking Poland, Philippines, and South Africa at the moment. So I've got to do 3 case studies. But it's sharing this conversation, and actually another thing that keeps me passionate, it keeps that fire, is that when I start this conversation, people say, "Never thought of that."
That's true.
Never thought that some dark heritage could be there in something as innocent as street names. And actually, street names are not innocent at all. They were part and intended as to be part of the civic and nation building identity.
And there's an honouring as well. If you get something named after you, are honouring it.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're honouring, you know, you're honouring slave owners.
Yeah.
That, you know, that then some years later, not a lot of years later, you know, just over 100 years later, after abolition, you invite those people who were born of the plantations to come and rebuild your country post World War II. That's how mad.
Well, it's like
It's crazy.
It's like it is.
And I like to get people to think about that in like real life, real time terms.
You go to many cities of Britain, you go to the old port areas there, and you will see Jamaica Street. And it can make you feel, if you know anything about it, what that street was about.
Yes, yeah. There's a Jamaica Street in Sheffield.
Yes.
You know, like things like, you know, like Havelock Square. You won't remember Havelock Square.
Yeah, I remember Havelock Square. When I first came to Sheffield, Havelock Square.
Yeah.
Yes.
Square. I know Square.
Yeah, Square.
Yeah.
Just off the Duke Carriage, just another way. Where a lot of our parents, it was mainly Jamaican parents there. You know, there was a blues house there and what have you. Well, Sir Henry Havelock in 1857 ordered and presided over a very, very violent suppression of an Indian rebellion.
Yes. Well,
Right? I think you mentioned, but like the Indian rebellion, and like, you know what? So he killed tens of thousands of people, and we're naming a piece of Sheffield after that. This city
Havelock,
that was
yeah.
abolition. This city that was suffragette, part of the suffrage movement. This city that's now called the City of Sanctuary. And I want to see if I can find anything in the archives or in old minutes and cabinet notes that looks at the conversation that agreed that this should be written named Stanningford Road or Havelock Square or Sorbie House. You know, the Sorbies were tool makers. You know, yeah. And that's what keeps my passion going. I want to know what makes this city function and leave a legacy. You know, who knows how long I've got left, you know, but hopefully I've got at least till I've got this PhD finished, you know. But I'm hoping I can leave a legacy, not just for my sons, but I've got 3 grandsons, you know, and another grandchild on the way in October, I think. But, you know, I've got a 5-year-old grandson, Harvey. I've got a 4-year-old grandson, just over, he'll be 4 in August. And I've got a 1-year-old grandson who's Harvey's brother, Fabian. And I hope there'll be something in there that they'll be able to look at and think, oh, my granddad did that.
Yeah.
You know, and then see if there's any gems in there that they could take. Because I'm only going to be touching the surface.
Yeah.
There are so many other things that need to happen in Sheffield, like, you know, the economic analysis of what made Sheffield a city, you know, and another thing, because whilst I've been in Sheffield, born here, I've always felt like there was an undercurrent. I know you felt it, and because you've had it in your work. There's always like, we get told like this Sheffield, like it's this place where everybody it's meant to feel welcome with like a large family. It's got its trade union background and what have you, and it's got its socialist front. But there's some harsh racism in this city. You never forget that you're not one of them in this city.
Well, we've known. We've always known. I mean, I always mention this.
And I want to know what this undercurrent is about, because, and I think, part of this will get us towards that. Then hopefully for somebody, for some young African to pick that baton up and run with it in a slightly different tangent.
Robert, can I say it's been fantastic talking with you.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure, man.
Always, and it's a little bit different to how we might normally meet, which might be sort of book up on the street there and talk, and we say we're going to talk some more. And it's been great to talk to you, because just to hear your passion, to hear your words, to hear your thinking, it is inspirational, because it gets you thinking as well. And if they, and getting others to think, to my mind, is a fantastic thing. And you've got me to think today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the weird thing, actually, the last, I think a couple of weeks ago, there was an event at the Millennium Gardens. Well, at the museum, and he was talking around the artistic, kind of infrastructure of Sheffield. And that to me is also, and what was, for me, what was the sad reality was those who are the originators of much of the artistry in Sheffield were not present. You see what I'm saying? So many conversations usually happen without us around that. And I think from just listening to you, I'm so aware of the importance of actually having our own narrative, a well-informed narrative. Because for me, I've just been a spectator today, just hearing you quote this guy and the other guy and that guy, the other guy. And I'm like,
I was trying not to do any of that.
I'm like, I need to go back and read something.
But it's one of the things I said to you. I mean, you've got the opportunity to, as I said, to dive in and sort of like, to really be focused there. And so often, and it's one question I was going to sort of ask about, when you retire, how finding something which actually can not occupy you, but you can really engage with, because retirement's, for many people, retirement can be difficult, and we know for many people of African origin, I mean, in the broadest sense there, that when you've never had the space to have other things, all you've had is you've been thankful you had a job.
To survive on a day-to-day
and
basis.
when I retired, I didn't have a plan. I just couldn't take probation anymore. It was too stressful in that there was too much change. And I was expected to go out and deliver decisions about change, and then have to overturn it 2 weeks later. I thought, I don't need this. So I had no plan. But then, shortly after, I mean, the way that I spend my time, I have my grandsons every week, to help my sons out with and daughters-in-laws with childcare. I've got an allotment. I've got my PhD now. Sadaka before and during. I'm busier now than when I was working full time. It's crazy.
But we're grateful, and I usually ask people about when is the book coming out.
I started writing a book.
It's the
years
first
ago.
one. He's asked it to lots of people. You're the first one to even begin to answer.
Yeah, I started writing a book, which was partly, I wrote about 13,000 words as well in no time. I just need to, I'm writing it as a novel, but like partly biographical. And I need to get some more inspiration to complete it. In fact, Delroy Hall keeps saying to me, because we had a bit of a motivational group between us, Raymond and his name will come to me in a short while. where we meet and we set goals and we then make sure that we, meet the goals. But this story, it's about two young kids growing up in a place like Parson Cross, St Anne's, wherever.
Yeah.
And one's a white kid and the other one isn't. Okay? And these kids did everything together, from like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, right through to leaving school. Every time the African kid went to Spud's house, I've called this guy Spud. I had a friend whose nickname was Spud. Anyways, the character's called Spud. And every time I went to Spud's house, because we went to each house out interchangeably, I used to I didn't realise at the time, but that kid were experiencing, I just said I, didn't I? Actually, Anyway, that kid were experiencing racism from Spud's dad. At first he just thought that he just didn't like him and just been a bit rough with him, But anyway, they grew up together. And then when the African kid became 16, he went to London for a summer holiday to spend with family. And when I came back, Spud had disappeared, didn't know where he'd gone to him, and we lost touch. Anyway, I'll keep it like that. And then, I went on and
So
got
where
into
did Spud
education.
Yeah.
Well, I want to come back to Spud. I
You got
got into education. I got a bit conscious, through my music and what have you. And then this character was on an anti-racist rally somewhere with a group of friends, and he got split up from his friends, this African kid, and got chased by these far-right skinheads. And so the African kid's running, don't know where he is, because he's in London somewhere. He don't know where he is. He don't know the area. He runs and he happens to run into a dead end, and there's like an old building that he runs inside, but this kid follows him in, and this kid is about to kick him in the head. This skinhead is about to kick this African in the head, and he looks up like this and says, "Spud!" And it's this kid. And then the story is going to go on to how they have a conversation, and then leaving the audience hanging as to whether they rekindle.
Well, isn't it? It's a play.
It is a
isn't it?
play,
Yeah,
It's a
bro.
it's an
play.
interactive play.
Absolutely.
You've been on training where half of the crowd gets split, and you run one character, and the other half.
Because
gets
it's a powerful story.
Yeah, and then as a interactive play, the audience can decide whether Spud puts the boot in,
Yes.
or whether they reconcile and have a conversation. So part of it, if they, one of the solutions is, one of the conclusions is that they do reconcile, and Spud starts to talk about how he felt abandoned by his African mate.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's like a kind of Cain and Abel thing.
Yeah.
In
It's got the personal there as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I've just not got back to
Yeah.
Anyway, anybody who hears this, that's my story still.
It
All
is-
rights
I-
reserved.
It's all right. It's, hey, but this you were talking there before about Delroy and others about sort of like getting sort of meeting,
Milton, as he ever felt.
meeting
Oh,
sort of
Milton.
objectives or goals. There you could see it with 3 or 4 people there. Let's just work on this. Let's
Well,
work. Yeah, let's work on this
Yeah.
because there's a script there.
Co-authors.
Yes,
Absolutely.
because you just think
Yeah.
to yourself, there are so. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got stories of.
You fancy it?
I fancied it. Yeah, I'm not a great writer, thinker.
Don't need to be a great
Just
writer,
some ideas.
but just need a concept.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yes,
absolutely
yes,
there.
yes,
Concept.
Because
that-
where I got stuck was how I was going to develop each character as
Yes.
a person.
Yes, because that otherwise
Yeah.
you go into that sort of cartoony sort
Yeah.
of thing. They're just too much sort of like
Yeah.
they're political
But
bag spokespeople.
Some of that is biographical, and some of it is fiction.
yeah. But
Which bit's which? Well, that's down to the audience.
it is, isn't it? Yeah,
Not for me to affirm.
And it's part of your research also, bro.
Yeah.
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 I've got
Great
to
story.
race a bit today, so let's walk down together there.
Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and never miss an episode. Until next time, keep those conversations going and the clippers buzzing.